Folks, what is going on? Ty B here, and it's the Trainwreck Sports Fantasy Podcast. We're breaking down some fantasy baseball as we get ready for the fantasy baseball playoffs. And I got some guy named Steve here joining me yet again as we look into some of the best strategies heading into the playoffs, some free agents to target. Plus, MLB roster expansion is coming up on September 1st. So we're going to talk about some of the prospects you should potentially be looking at, especially in long-term dynasty type formats, because some of these guys will more than likely be starters next year. So if you can get them now, even before they're called up, it might be time to strike while the fire's hot, especially if you're out of contention. But Steve, I got to talk to you first here. You see the background for me, the Field of Dreams game. Absolutely incredible. Yankees have been on a tear since then. I hate it because the Blue Jays were on a tear as well, and now they've kind of lost a few games. But the AL East is getting incredibly tight, and we saw the highest rated regular season game since, I believe, 2006.
Yeah, I mean, that was the first regular season baseball game that felt like a playoff game or that felt special in a long time. I mean, baseball's always been so bad at, I guess marketing their game, getting people hyped for regular season baseball games because everyone's like, there's 162 games. Does it really matter? But they did a phenomenal job with the Field of Dreams game. I have no complaints. And the game itself turned out incredible. The White Sox up for a little bit. The Yankees came storming back, top nine. And then my guy, Tim Anderson, bottom nine with the 2-run walk-off home run. You love to see it. It was perfect. And yeah, Ty, it is going to be a crazy, not only AL East race, but wild card race. I was pretty vocal on Twitter the past couple of weeks saying I love the value on the Athletics to win the World Series. Well, since then, Chris Bassett got hit with a line drive in the head. He's going to be out for 6 weeks. And now we have a 4-team race for that final wild card spot. The Yankees are storming, and they're the top team. You have the Red Sox and A's tied now, and the Blue Jays right behind them. It's going to be a great race going down for the AL East, the AL West, and the wild card. I can't wait.
There's going to be a ton of entertaining baseball, and that also means games that matter. So guys aren't going to be looking to take some of these random, afternoon games off, which is going to be a good thing for a lot of you guys as we're into the playoffs here for you. And another game the MLB does well, sort of these gimmicky promotional games, the Little League World Series Classic. We're going to see that yet again. That'll be really cool this year. It's unfortunate that we're not going to have the international teams there because Shohei Ohtani and the Angels are going to be sort of the star of that game as they take on the Cleveland baseball team in that one. And that's going to be another real cool event. I don't know if they're going to have fans or not because they're not having fans at the Little League World Series outside of the parents, and I think they're trying to obviously limit the spread of COVID. So we'll see how that event fully goes. But in the past, it's been really cool, and seeing the players go to Lamade and Volunteer Stadium there over in Williamsport and get to watch some of the players and then interact with them in the stands and teach them some things and different grips and stuff like that. I think number one, that experience for those kids is you can't put a numerical value on how awesome that is for them. And then just being able to actually learn and get some legitimate insight from some guys who have been in their position and have figured out how to make it and make it for the long term into the MLB. So that's another really cool event. But Steve, we got to talk about it here. Fantasy playoffs are coming up for everybody, and you need to be in a good position. The first thing, I know you and I have kind of harped on this a lot throughout the year. It's, hey, don't ride the hot hand from May. Just because he was good in May doesn't mean he's good in July. Doesn't mean he's going to help win you a fantasy championship now. He may have helped your team get to first place, but he might not be the guy to keep you in first place. Steve, let's talk about some playoff strategies.
Yeah, so I think that's a great one to start with is you want to ignore season-long numbers, and I can't stress this enough. Just because a guy's 15th on the player rater doesn't mean he's been the 15th best player on the player rater for the past month. And in the playoffs, it's either a week or a 2-week, window each matchup where you have to win and you have to capitalize on the maximum amount of points if you're in points leagues or the amount of categories you can win each week. And when you look at certain players, they're, it's kind of distracting where you see a good season slash line. Maybe a guy's batting 270, 20-something home runs, 60 RBIs, 5 steals, like that look like good numbers. And then you look into it more, the past 3 weeks, he's batting 180, a perfect guy to, who fits that description is Jared Walsh, who
Yeah.
has been a monster in the beginning of the season. He was one of the best pickups, arguably one of like the in contention for like a fantasy type MVP, because he was a free agent pickup, and he was at times a top 3 first baseman in all leagues. Since July, he's been miserable, and he's hurt your lineup having him in it. Guys like that are the ones I want to avoid. And the best part about nowadays competing in fantasy is you have so many tools at your disposal. Baseball Reference, Fangraphs. You can just go to these websites. They're free. Search the player's name. Find out what they've been doing, what their trends are, their splits. See if they've been playing.
Yeah, you can look month by month. You can look at a lot of that different stuff.
Yeah, you can look month by month. You can look like game by
Last
game with
7
the game
days,
logs.
last 2 weeks. I think you can set it to any amount of dates back, I think.
Anything you want, and that helps you immensely, because there's a lot of people in fantasy baseball that just think, oh, my team's been good all year, I'm just going to let that lineup ride. And I'm preaching, you have to switch guys in and out. You have to if you want to win. And the biggest thing to do is just find those guys who have been cold the past couple of weeks, even though they may be owned in 90% of leagues. Maybe they're guys who have, had a really hot start, but they've been ice cold lately. Just bench them. Even if you don't want to drop them, just get them out of your lineup, because I'm telling you, an 0 for 4 night with 2 Ks for a guy in 95% of leagues is not going to help you.
Nope, absolutely not. And that brings me to my next the strategy, if you will, here, especially for people in categories, obviously, for this one, because when you're trying to stuff, your strikeouts and your wins, you can do that and just completely punt on saves. That's just one category in most leagues. So if you want to go the route that I have in one of my leagues, because so many teams, it's a smaller league, so many teams have a stacked pitching lineup. So if you're able to get your strikeouts up by getting 1-2 extra starts by dropping a reliever, because even if he gets maybe 3 appearances in a week, gets you 1 or 2 saves, but think about maybe 3, 4, 5 strikeouts at most for a week. So if you can pick up a starter instead who's going to get you 2 starts, which is my next point, I'll get to that. It's obviously worth it, because he's getting 2 attempts at a start, more than likely going to get you more than 5 innings, should get you more than 5 strikeouts in that 1 appearance. He can get you 2. That's great. And when you're looking at it and evaluating players, if it's a 1 week or even a 2 week, look and see where he's slated to start throughout. Some teams might have an off day, so they might, push guys back. They might scratch some starts and different little things when you're looking at, back of the rotation and some of this other stuff, especially with the bullpens being able to be expanded with the roster expansion coming up on September 1st, Steve. So being able to get some starters there, you might be able to get a 2-start week out of, or 2, you can get 3 or 4 maybe in a 2-week span. Yeah, sign me up for that. That's exactly what you need to be looking for.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I have been punting saves in the playoffs for as long as I can remember, just because I primarily play in categories leagues, and I'm, sacrificing 1 category saves to help with quality starts, wins, strikeouts, these counting stats that if you get a starter, it's going to help you more than a reliever that pitches 1 inning. And another thing too, if you're in a league that has relief spots where you can only start a relief pitcher there, look for the mid relievers. Look for guys who are going to work 2 to 3 innings each, outing, because they're going to have 2 to 3 appearances per week. That's up to 9 innings you can get for free. And a lot of these mid relievers are very good pitchers, but no one cares about them in fantasy because they don't get wins and they don't get saves. Well, guess what? They're helping your ERA. They're helping your whip. They're helping your strikeouts. And these are guys I love to target too, because if a guy in the starting rotation goes down with an injury, 9 times out of 10, the mid reliever that they trust, they're going to promote to a starter for a couple starts that week. And I can't stress it enough. These are guys that are owned in less than 10% of leagues just because they don't really get any of the, flashy categories. All guys want to own in fantasy for relievers are guys who get saves. Well, there are so many quality arms in bullpens that just are guys that they use for a couple innings. So they're not their 9th inning guy. They're their 6th, 7th inning guy. These are guys that can really help your fantasy teams. And you don't have to pay for them. You don't have to trade for them. They're available everywhere. I'd go out and get mid relievers, especially if you're like me and you want to punt saves to try to get more strikeouts, more wins, more quality starts.
Yep, absolutely, and that's hitting the nail on the head there. It's how can I focus my team in the best way possible to win, a majority of the categories, because that's all you need to do. You don't need to beat these teams 10-0
Right.
or 12-0 or what have you. If you're able to win by one, that's all that matters in the playoffs. Right. People don't ask how; they ask how many wins and how you won that championship, baby. So that brings us to our next point out of the strategies. Let's talk a little bit here about some of the free agency guys still to target. This first one I'm going to toss out. He's owned now up in about 70% of leagues. But if he's still available in yours, you might as well pick him up. Shane Mcclanahan has not allowed more than 3 earned runs in a start since the very beginning of June 2nd, I believe. He's been pretty good since then, only giving up 3 earned runs in 1 or 2 of those starts. Been keeping his numbers down, decent amount of strikeouts. And with that Tampa Bay's Rays teams, he's been getting wins, and today another good start. I think 5 innings. He might still be going as we're recording this, but when you're looking at it, another one with 1 earned runs. I like that, a young arm who should be getting more and more experience, and a guy, especially, like I said, if you can add him and it's a dynasty league or something like that, you have to add him now because his long-term projections could be very good.
Yeah, especially in Dynasty Keeper leagues too. A guy like Shane is someone you want to add regardless if you think you're going to use him or not in the playoffs, because he could have trade value in the offseason. You really never know with how some teams want to rebuild. Maybe you can get a draft pick for him just based on how your league's structured. But I'm going to go a kind of a different direction here. I'm going to go with a guy that I really don't think is going to have any value next year unless he keeps up what he's doing. And it's someone who I just like to ride the hot hand. And it's Frank Schwindle of the Chicago Cubs. The past 2 weeks, he's been the second best first baseman in all of fantasy, ahead of Joey Votto, Freddie Freeman, Max Muncy, and Jose Abreu, guys who have been on a tear lately. Well, guess what? Frank Schwindle has been a little bit better. Since the Anthony Rizzo trade, he's been the Cubs' everyday first baseman. And Ty, the Cubs are not trying to get to the playoffs. They were sellers at the deadline. Their season's over. So what are they going to do? They're going to play these guys, see if they have a spot for next year. And Schwindle so far has earned it. On the year, he's batting .329 with 5 home runs, 18 RBIs, and 10 runs in 25 games. But since he's joined the Cubs, those stats, who are already good, have been even better. He's batting .390 with a .429 on base, a .729 slugging, 4 home runs, and 15 RBIs. He's been on fire. He's helped every lineup he's been in, and he's only owned in 17.8% of leagues because no one recognizes the name. No one wants to own a Cub because that team stinks. I don't care about him. Well, he's got multi-hits. I think his last 3 games, he's been helping every lineup he's been in, and he's free. Just go grab him. It's the playoffs right now. Who cares about the guys' names on your roster? If they're producing for this week, I want to own them, and that's what Frank Schwindle's doing. And he's, my favorite type of player where you just ride the hot hand. As soon as I see him have like 3-4 straight days where he's hitless, I'm dropping him and I'm going to forget about him. I don't care. But while he's hot, I'm riding that hot hand because I'll tell you what, there's not a lot of guys in fantasy right now that are batting around 400 over the past 3 weeks.
No, not at all. I mean, that's few and far in between. So if you're able to pick someone up like that and he's still hot, you might as well ride it. I don't see why not. It's a perfect strategy there, Steve. So I like that there with that pickup. And I think you said you have one more for us.
Yeah, I got one more, and this is one where, I think you can use him whether he's a starter or a reliever, and it's Reynaldo Lopez of the Chicago White Sox. The White Sox are a very good team this year. They're pushing for, a good spot in the playoffs. Hopefully the 1 seed in the AL is what they're targeting. And he's been used as a mid reliever. He came back in July. He's appeared in 11 games so far this year, but he's made 3 starts. He's 2-0 with a 1.08 ERA, a .72 WHIP, 26 strikeouts and 7 walks in just 25 innings. And no one really cares because, like I said, he's been a mid reliever. If you saw those, stats as a starter, everyone would pick him up. He's owned in 5.8% of ESPN leagues, and he's starting this Sunday at the Rays. what I love even more about Reynaldo Lopez, he has starting pitcher and relief pitcher eligibility in ESPN leagues. So if you have a league where it's forcing you to set a number of starters, a number of relievers, you can put him in either slot wherever he helps. And in the month of August, Ty, he's pitched 14 innings, one earned run, 15 strikeouts, a .64 ERA, a .78 WHIP. I don't know what type of water they're drinking on that side of Chicago, but their pitching has been elite this year. And Lopez has career best numbers, his best strikeout rate of his career, his best walk rate of his career, his best FIP of his career. Even if he's just used as a starter just this one time on Sunday, and then he goes back to the relief pitcher role, I still want him because he's going to be pitching innings for this team, regardless if it's starting or if it's coming out of the pen. And he's in 5.8% of leagues he's owned. He's available in 95% of fantasy leagues. He's a guy I think can help you immediately. And just stream him for Sunday. If you need an extra starter, stream him for Sunday. I don't see why you wouldn't.
Yep, absolutely. That's a great angle there, Stevie. Love it when we're getting those guys with those low owned percentages. When you can hop on that before everyone else, it's the perfect time to strike while the fire is hot proverbially. And the fire is going to be hot come September 1st because it's the MLB roster expansions. Yep. 2 more roster spots open up on every single team's bench. So that means we're going to see probably some youngsters get some shots. First guy I'm going to talk about, well, first 2 guys I'll talk about here at the first base position. So it's one of those spots where, throughout most of the year, has been very, very inconsistent. So looking at it here, the Arizona Diamondbacks, Christian Walker, Drupal Cabrera, Pavin Smith, doesn't matter who's at first base. They've all struggled for the Diamondbacks. So it makes a ton of sense to bring up Seth Beer, not one of the highest rated prospects because he's not a great defensive player, but you can still, just put him at first base. He can catch the ball. He's been hitting .295 over 85 games this season in AAA with 15 home runs, shows a ton of power. He's a left-hander, and he doesn't have a lot of issues going up against the left-handed pitching, which is a very good sign for him going forward. I like potentially adding him if he's called up. And another guy who's going to be right on that cusp just because of his age, a former high school first-round pick in 2017 of the Royals, looking at Nick Prado there, a big lefty bat, another guy who predominantly first baseman. He's just been hitting the shit out of the ball this year with 21 total home runs and in all of the minor leagues with 60 RBIs. Has also added 9 stolen bases. Not one of those guys who's overly sized at first base and you just pop him there just because he's got a bunch of power. He's an average sized player, so he's got a little bit of speed and can do it with the bat, obviously. Not over the top with that contact consistently yet. I think he can still figure that out. Only 21, 22 years old still. Nick Prado, though, potential guy. If not him, maybe even Bobby Wick getting called up there in Kansas City. We'll see. We'll have to keep our eyes tuned on what they do.
Yeah, I mean, you touched on it, Ty. Both guys you named are on teams that really aren't in great positions this year. So why not call up their young guys, give them a shot, see what they can do at the major league level, for a little bit of time, but still keep that year eligibility. I love that strategy there. And I think it's something that you can really capitalize on because these aren't household names yet. Not your average Joe fantasy player does not know these names. They aren't looking into these guys. So we're here to give you these names before, they have their breakout weeks, because as soon as they get called up, these are the guys I have on my watch list that I'm targeting that are names no one's really going to recognize, but they'll still put up good numbers for you if they have the opportunity.
Yep, absolutely. And I got 2 more names for you guys. Okay. One here, Josh Young. He's a prospect there in the Texas Rangers organization, only in Double-A still, but he's been absolutely mashing the ball, showing plus contact at this level with 10 home runs, 40 RBIs, hitting .307 on the season. That OPS over 900. And this is just his second season in the minors because obviously 2019 draft year, no minors there in 2020, but has been absolutely mashing, like I said, in Double-A. Wouldn't be surprised if he got the call right to the major leagues just because he's a guy who was a little bit more polished as a prospect because he was coming out of college and spent, more time getting used to a higher level of of gameplay, especially with some of his performances up in the Cape Cod League. And one last guy I'm looking at is a catching prospect. You already know you always have to keep your eyes peeled on catchers, because if you can get a guy with some pop from the catcher position, he's a guy you're going to want to keep for the season and maybe even for the long term in a dynasty or keeper formats. I'm talking about a guy in Keibert Ruiz who had been traded from the Dodgers, couldn't really find a spot in that everyday MLB lineup because of Will Smith and such. So they kept him in AAA probably longer than needed. He was hitting over 300 on the year across 50 games with 16 home runs for the Oklahoma City Dodgers. Since coming over and having to play for the Rochester Red Wings, it's been a bit of a bumpy road, but that's kind of expected with a young catcher who has to learn a whole new pitching staff and everything else with a new organization. So once he figures that out, which I think he kind of has, he's been hitting a little bit better now after that first 6-game series against the Buffalo Bisons, who've been playing very well, especially at home since they've gotten back. So I think he'll get that back going, and he's probably the best catcher that the Nationals have right now and should be penciled in as their everyday starter if he does get called up in September.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, especially in dynasty keeper leagues. Target these top prospects that you think will have a role next year. Even if you're not in playoff contention, even if your team isn't in a good spot, if you have a lot of keepers in your league, people not only will pay for prospects, but you may get lucky, and this guy may get, the off-season hype where their draft position rises by 150 spots, and next thing you know, you have a dynasty superstar in your hand. And it's very easy to do. You can just look and search for MLB's top prospects, see their stat lines right there, see which guys you want to target. And if you're in dynasty keeper leagues and these top guys are still available, just go grab them. It's better than having a guy that's not going to help you next year just rotting away on your roster. There's no harm in just leaving a few spots open just to stash guys. I've been stashing guys in the IL all year. I've been stashing prospects in my dynasty keeper leagues all year. And that doesn't change when the playoffs start. If you have the luxury and the room to do it, absolutely go ahead and use, every resource to your advantage to stash these guys and give you an advantage going into next season.
Absolutely. I had Jack Flaherty stashed. Unfortunately, came back probably a week or two late for me to make a playoff push. But the dude's been electric all season. If I was like, if I can get him back at all for a playoff push, it'll be well worth taking up that IL spot. And it's the difference between winning leagues and losing them sometimes, because I was a guy who had decent pitching, but if you put Jack Flaherty in there for the entire season, that's probably the difference between 2 to 3 more wins that I have and would have put me in a playoff spot. So you guys got to make sure you're vigilant, make sure you're paying attention to who other teams are dropping, because there's times where other people's ILs are full and they're forced and pushed into making some tough decisions. And if you can be the person who comes out on top of that, if you got the space to do the stash, you might as well take that chance, Stevie.
Yeah, and I think another guy that I would bring up is Corey Kluber. He's like I think he's owned in half of ESPN leagues right now, and he's making rehab starts. These are guys you want to target. Husker Yanoa, who I talked about a few weeks ago, he was a guy, that has stashed that was out for months. He came back, his first start back, 5 2/3 scoreless. Eliezer Hernandez of the Marlins, who's probably still available in your league. He had a great start coming back from the 60-day IL. These are guys that can really help you that, people just don't care about because they haven't pitched that much all year long, but they can really help your teams. And like I said, if your IL isn't, full at all times, you're doing it wrong. If it's not your guys on your roster that are hurt, and you have room on your IL, find a way to get guys in free agency, because I promise you there's going to be 10, 20, 30 guys IL eligible in free agency right now in your leagues that you can pick up, throw on your IL, stash for a few weeks, and hey, if you make the semifinals, the championship, and they get activated, that's a huge, huge advantage.
Yep, absolutely. And, we'll end it there on that, Steve. Probably some of the best advice you could give out looking ahead towards the playoffs. Hopefully everyone makes the playoffs and gets a big championship victory, unless you're in Stevie's. I want Stevie to win that one. Sorry, Meerkat, I know you're in last place. Oh, unfortunately.
Meerkat didn't make the playoffs.
Yeah, but shout out to everyone who tuned in. Make sure if you guys are watching this over on YouTube, you toss it a like. If you're watching it on Twitter or anywhere else, make sure retweet it, share it, and let us know some of your strategies heading into the playoffs, because it never hurts to learn a little bit more, Stevie, from some other players. Everyone does it a little bit differently, and I think we got it down, but you never know.
Yeah, and I mean, we touched on a lot of tips today. I got a few more that I mentioned in my article that was posted this morning to trainwrecksports.com, so make sure you check it out. I gave my 10, biggest tips for the playoffs, and I'll give a little sneak preview. Not only you worry about your own team, try to target your opponent's team. See what they do well, see what they do poorly, and try to capitalize on their weaknesses.
Yep, absolutely. If you see a guy who might, say his starting pitchers are having a bad week in terms of number of starts, and you can just outnumber the starts, take advantage of it.
Yep.
It's all about matchups at this point and figuring out how to win those matchups, getting yourself into the playoffs, and winning that championship. So shout out again, everyone tuning in. For myself, Ty B, and Steve, go get that free money.